Have you ever, like, started a project fully expecting it to just be a total breeze, only to watch it completely crash and burn?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
Right, of course you have. But think about what you actually did next. Like, when that project failed spectacularly, did you try to hide the evidence?
Most people do.
Yeah, exactly. Or did you document exactly why it failed step by step for the entire internet to see?
Yeah, that's the rare path. We usually just bury the error
I
logs.
totally bury them.
It's deeply ingrained in human nature, to only present the final successful product. Like, we want the Instagram-worthy harvest,
Right, the perfect picture.
not the graveyard of dead seedlings that came
Yeah.
before it. Showing that messy, broken process just feels way too vulnerable for most people.
Well, today we are taking a deep dive into the mind of someone who actively rejects that whole proprietary closed-off mindset.
And it is a fascinating mindset to explore.
It really is. We're looking at this incredibly detailed blog post published today, April 11th, 2026, from a site called kianmeng.org. The author goes by Ang, and he describes himself with this, I just love this title. He calls himself an old software plumber who spends his nights tinkering with floss.
Floss, meaning free Libra and open source software.
Exactly.
That term, software plumber, really tells you everything you need to know about his approach to the world.
How so?
Well, a plumber isn't trying to build some glittering perfect monument. A plumber deals with the underlying infrastructure.
The messy stuff.
Right. They look for the leaks, they monitor the pressure, and they methodically patch the pipes just to keep the system flowing.
So what does this all mean? We aren't just looking at a gardening update today.
No, not at all.
We're going to see what happens when you take that exact plumbing mindset, that really rigorous open source software engineering philosophy, and apply it to the chaotic, just entirely unpredictable reality of nature.
It's such a brilliant collision of two worlds.
It is. We're using just this one blog post, and it's frankly unbelievable archives as our guide.
Because software is supposed to be deterministic. Right. You write a specific function, and you expect a specific output every single time.
Right. It's code. It's math.
But nature is the ultimate chaotic environment. You're dealing with biological variables, random weather patterns, microscopic soil conditions.
Bugs, literally and figuratively.
Exactly. And when you try to force a deterministic mindset onto a chaotic system like a garden, the friction there is where the real learning happens.
Which brings us to the specific subject of Ang's post. It's titled Notes on Gardening Part 863, Restarting the Fine-leaf Greek Basil Project.
Also known as Bonsai Basil.
Yes, Bonsai Basil. But right out of the gate, I just want you, the listener, to pause and consider that phrase, Part 863.
Yeah, that numbering system alone just completely reveals the scale of what we're looking at here.
It's wild.
It immediately establishes that this isn't just some casual weekend hobby. Part 863 signifies a relentless, long-term, systematic investigation.
Every single entry is a data point.
Right, on a multi-year timeline.
Yeah. And this particular entry, it's documenting a pretty brutal failure, honestly.
Let's look at the actual data he provides.
Yeah, so he started this Bonsai Basil project with a batch of 100 seeds, and the packaging on those seeds promised a 99% germination rate.
Which is basically the biological equivalent of a service level agreement intact.
Totally. You plant 100 seeds, you are guaranteed 99 little basil plants. But the actual results, out of 100 seeds, he managed to sprout exactly 3 into mature plants.
A 3% success rate on a product promising 99%.
Think about that in the context of, like, anything else you might buy.
You would be unacceptable.
Right. If you bought a piece of enterprise software or even just a Wi-Fi router with a 99% guaranteed uptime and it just crashes and burns on day one,
You'd be furious.
you'd box it back up, demand a refund, probably leave a scathing review online. Most people, in a gardening context, would just throw the dirt in the trash, assume they have a black thumb, and go buy a pre-grown plant.
What's fascinating here is Ang's response is just entirely devoid of that typical frustration.
It really is.
There's no emotional language in the post about being cheated by the seed company or being a bad gardener. Instead, he just treats the failure as neutral data.
He literally links back to a previous post, Part 606, I think, where he initially tracked those 3 surviving plants.
Yeah, he objectively details their condition, and he doesn't sugarcoat the outcome at all.
No, he says, to be honest, the plants weren't exactly a sight to behold, as they ended up looking rather leggy compared to other basil varieties.
Right, and that term leggy, it's actually a specific botanical condition known as etiolation.
Etiolation.
Yeah. It happens when a plant is basically starved for light.
Oh, I see.
Instead of growing robust and full, the plant just redirects all its energy into rapidly elongating its stem.
Like it's stretching out.
Exactly,
Okay.
desperately stretching toward whatever faint light source it can find. It results in this really pale, fragile, awkward-looking plant.
But by documenting the exact state of these, fragile, leggy plants, he totally removes his own ego from the equation.
Completely.
He isn't saying, I am a terrible gardener. He's saying, the vendor promised 99% in an ideal environment. My local apartment yielded 3%, and the output suffered from etiolation.
He's essentially turned a personal failure into an objective environmental bug report.
A bug report,
Yeah.
yes. And how does a software plumber patch a buggy organic project?
Well, once you have an objective bug report, you can start engineering the patch.
Okay, let's unpack this, because his next move is where the strategy gets kind of wild.
Yeah, it's very counterintuitive.
He harvests the seeds from those 3 awkward, leggy, surviving plants to restart the project.
Right, waiting for a struggling plant to go to seed, harvesting them and starting over. Today, April 11th, he notes that new seedlings from that batch have actually started to sprout.
I have to push back on this strategy, though, because, if we're using the software analogy, this seems like terrible logic. If those 3 plants were fragile and leggy and generally struggling, they sound like fundamentally flawed hardware. Why wouldn't you just scrap them, go to a different supplier, and buy a brand new, higher quality batch of seeds?
It's a fair question.
Like, why is he deliberately doubling down and, forking the repository of the weakest, buggiest code?
Well, it looks counterintuitive until you factor in the concept of localized adaptation.
Okay, explain that.
You're assuming a new batch of seeds from a store would be better code, but those store-bought seeds were likely bred in a perfect, climate-controlled commercial greenhouse.
Oh, right.
They have a 99% germination rate there.
Yeah.
But Ang already proved that the greenhouse's main branch code just completely crashes in his specific living room.
Because his living room isn't a greenhouse, so the original seeds just couldn't handle his specific environment.
Exactly. Now look at the 3 leggy plants. Yes, they were stressed, but they survived.
They made it.
Out of 100, those 3 had the specific genetic resilience to endure whatever unique combination of low light or humidity or soil microbes exist in Ang's house.
That makes so much sense.
In software terms, he isn't propagating buggy code. He's created a localized fork of the repository that is battle-tested for his exact server environment.
Wow. He took the 3% that didn't crash and made them the foundation for version 2.0.
That completely shifts how you view a struggling plant, doesn't it?
It totally does. It isn't a failure anymore. It's the ultimate survivor of a stress test.
And because he knows these new seeds possess the right genetics for his space, he can now focus entirely on fixing the environmental variables that cause the etiolation, that legginess in the first place.
And he actually outlines those specific bug fixes in the post.
Yeah. What are his patches for this round?
Well, first, he verifies the data. He notes that the new sprouts have matured just enough to be identified by their specific foliage pattern and density. He even includes a picture to prove they are actually the bonsai basil he intended to grow, and not just like stray weed seeds that blew into the pot.
Which is basically basic data validation. You have to ensure the output matches the expected parameters before you commit resources to it.
Then he adjusts the parameters. He writes, taking a cue from past mistakes, we'll need to transplant these seedlings into a proper potting mix with good drainage.
Crucial step.
And he adds, we also need to place them in a microclimate where they'll get at least 6 hours of direct sunlight.
Notice how he phrases that too. Potting mix, drainage, microclimate.
Yeah, very technical.
We aren't talking about sunshine and dirt in some romantic, poetic sense. He's identifying the exact environmental dependencies required for this localized fork to compile successfully.
The previous setup, the old pot, was essentially a server with a memory leak.
Great analogy.
It didn't have the drainage to clear the water, and it lacked the sunlight processing power to run the basil application without lagging, which is what resulted in those leggy stems.
Exactly. By moving them to a location with guaranteed 6-hour direct sunlight and high drainage soil, he's finally providing the hardware needed to support his new localized software.
It's just a perfect feedback loop. Observe the crash, isolate the surviving variables, patch the environment, and run the program again.
Simple, but incredibly effective.
And he signs off the post so casually, too. He just says, let's see how this goes this round. Till the next post. Yours truly, Ang.
Very understated.
Super understated, but the methodology behind it is incredibly rigorous. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you're looking at canmeng.org, it's not just this one post that proves how deep this goes.
Oh, not at all.
If you pull your eyes away from the picture of the basil sprouts and look at the sidebar of the blog, the archives are just staggering.
The sheer volume of data he has committed to the public record is, well, it's difficult to comprehend at first glance.
To give you, the listener, a sense of the scale of this author's documentation habit, the archives stretch all the way back to 2011.
15 years of data.
Yeah. But just look at his recent output. In 2022, he published 730 posts.
Okay.
In 2023, he published 730 posts.
Wow.
In 2024, because it was a leap year, he published 732 posts. And in 2025, back to 730 posts.
That translates to exactly 2 posts a day, every single day, without fail, for years.
Literally years. How does someone even build a system to do that mechanically? 2 posts a day means no days off, no vacations from the documentation.
No sick days where you just, don't feel like logging your progress.
Exactly. Already in mid-April 2026, he is at 303 posts. What does that level of daily commit logging even do to a person's brain?
I think it fundamentally alters how you process reality.
Yeah.
When you commit to documenting your actions twice a day, you can no longer operate on autopilot. You are forced to become an active, meticulous observer of your own life.
You can't just gloss over things.
Right. Every minor task becomes an opportunity to extract data. You stop seeing a dying plant as a nuisance.
Yeah.
You start seeing it as a required entry in the daily log. The obligation to document strips away the luxury of ignoring your failures.
And you see that observation applied to an incredibly diverse set of topics on his site. The project section reads like the notebook of a Renaissance hacker.
Really does.
Yes, you have notes on gardening up to part 863, but right next to it he has notes on fish keeping. And he's up to part 231 on that, evaluating water flow dynamics, artificial cave designs, and the specific breeding parameters for a fish called a pistogramma.
Which is a perfect parallel to the gardening.
Is it? I don't know much about fish.
Yeah, well, a pistogramma are a type of dwarf cichlid, and they're known for requiring highly specific, slightly acidic water chemistry and really complex habitats to thrive and breed.
Oh, wow.
If the pH is slightly off or the water flow is too strong, the whole system fails. So evaluating a cave design for a cichlid is really just another form of configuring a microclimate.
It's system design applied to an aquarium.
Exactly.
And he seamlessly pivots from aquatic ecosystems to purely digital ones. He has notes on Haskell programming up to part 106, where he dives into functional programming, parsing, and test selection.
Right.
He covers Elixir and Erlang programming, Python, artificial intelligence.
The jump to Haskell and Elixir is very telling, actually,
Why is that?
because these are functional, highly concurrent programming languages. Unlike some languages where you can get away with messy, interconnected state changes, functional programming requires strict logic.
Okay.
You provide an input, it passes through a pure function, and you get an output. If you try to introduce a hidden variable, the code breaks. That requires a mindset that perfectly aligns with tracking exact variables in a garden or an aquarium.
And it doesn't stop with code either. He has notes on dieting up to part 111, where he publicly tracks his daily body weight fluctuations.
He's open sourcing himself.
He really is. He has notes on home improvement, typesetting, guitar. He is treating his own body weight and his guitar practice with the same relentless variable tracking methodology as his Haskell code.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really all comes back to that term from his bio. Flow Recess, Free Libre, and open source software.
Right, the open source philosophy.
Ang isn't just a user of open source. He is applying its core philosophy to his existence. Look at the organizations he actively supports in his sidebar. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation, the Tor Project, Wikipedia.
All massive open source and free information advocates.
Exactly. These groups are built on the belief that knowledge, tools, and systems should be freely accessible, auditable, and modifiable by anyone.
Right. The open source model argues that if a piece of software is closed off and proprietary, only a small group of people can fix its bugs.
Which limits progress.
But if the code is open to the public, thousands of eyes can look at it, find the flaws, and collaboratively build a much more resilient system.
And Ang is taking that exact philosophy and applying it to his everyday life. Earlier, You mentioned how most of us curate our lives like a closed proprietary Apple product.
Yeah, we hide the crashes.
Ang is living like the Linux operating system.
Oh, I love that.
It's open, it's constantly being debugged in public, and it is endlessly customizable. By documenting his daily failures in fishkeeping cave designs, Haskell parsing, and the drainage requirements of Bonsai Basil, he is providing a free repository of localized knowledge for the entire world.
He is pushing his personal commit logs to the public internet every single day.
Without fail.
If someone in a similar climate is trying to grow bonsai basil and they hit a wall, they might search the internet, stumble across part 863, and realize that the promised 99% germination rate is just a lab condition variable.
Right. They'll see his exact microclimate adjustments and probably save themselves months of trial and error.
He's allowing the public to fork his life experiences.
And he does it with absolute humility, which is the best part.
He really does. At the bottom of the sidebar, he includes this disclaimer. He clarifies that the opinions expressed are his own, not his employer's. But the crucial part is this line. All content provided in this blog is for informational purposes only. I cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of all information supplied here and will accept no liability for any loss or damage incurred.
That is essentially the standard MIT open source software license, just translated into a human disclaimer.
Oh, totally.
Use this code at your own risk. It compiled successfully on my machine, or in this case, my garden, but your local variables may differ.
Here is the raw data, but I am not guaranteeing the result. And you see that ethos in how interconnected he is, too. He links out to code repositories like GitHub, CPAN, and PyPI.
And CPAN and PyPI, for those who don't know, are these massive public libraries where developers share packages of code for Perl and Python.
So instead of everyone reinventing the wheel, you can just download a module someone else wrote to solve a specific problem.
Exactly. He is contributing to those massive libraries of code, but he also links to his Spotify and YouTube. He's utilizing every conceivable avenue to share his learning process.
It's just a radical public display of trial, error, and iteration.
That is the profound takeaway from exploring qianmeng.org and the ongoing saga of the fine-leaf Greek basil. It redefines what progress actually looks like.
It really does.
True progress isn't about hitting that promised 99% success rate on your very first try. That's just marketing copy. Whether you're writing a web application, breeding dwarf cichlids, or planting a garden.
Reality is the 97% failure rate.
Reality is how meticulously you document that 97% failure rate. Resilience is having the patience to look at the 3 awkward, struggling plants that survived and recognizing them not as failures, but as localized adaptations.
Harvesting those battle-tested seeds.
Right. Configuring a better microclimate with proper drainage and running the compilation again. Failure isn't an endpoint in an open source life. It's simply the first necessary data point in the next iteration.
It completely reframes how you look at a messy, frustrating project. When things fall apart, it's not a disaster to be hidden away. It's just part 1 of an 800-part series.
This raises an important question, though. Think about a minor, frustrating failure in your own life right now.
Oh, man.
Maybe it's a hobby you quietly abandoned, a piece of code that refused to compile, a diet that didn't stick, or, a plant sitting on your windowsill right now that's looking distinctly leggy.
I think we all have at least one of those hiding in the background somewhere.
Definitely. Imagine if you were forced to write a public Part 1 journal entry about that exact failure today. What if you had to objectively document the crash, completely remove your ego and embarrassment from the narrative, and list the specific environmental bug fixes you plan to implement tomorrow?
That's a scary thought.
It is. But how would that change your relationship with failing? If you stopped curating your proprietary image and started treating your life like a public, open-source project, what would your Part 863 look like?
What a brilliant challenge for us all. Instead of sweeping the broken pieces under the rug, you lay them out on the workbench, analyze the data, and start engineering a patch.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all for taking this deep dive with us today into the fascinating cross-disciplinary world of a software plumber's garden.
It's been a fun one.
The next time you fail spectacularly, don't hide the error logs. Document them for the rest of us. We'll see you next time.